to talk a bit about why we've become obsessed with meaningful measurement. And I think I'm going to start on a personal level. I've spent a lot, I'm quite old, I've spent a lot of time trying to raise money over many, many, many years working for different charities. And I've become really frustrated by the gap between genuine learning and how we measure impact and report on that impact. Over the years, I've felt under pressure to overclaim when applying for funds, and then to overclaim again when reporting on that activity. I've also found myself entering numbers into forms which I don't believe, not because they're a lie, but because it's not always clear whether we're all using the same definitions when we're collecting the numbers. How do we define homelessness? What if we don't describe the people we work with as beneficiaries or service users? How much does someone need to participate to be counted as a participant? We don't kind of know the rules, and we don't know if anybody else is doing it in the same way as us. So we don't actually know whether those numbers mean anything. And even if I do believe the number, I don't think it tells us anything worth knowing, because it's being submitted as if it does. Let's give an example. We might say we're going to work with 100 people with experience of homelessness over the course of a year. And at the end of the year, we've worked with 105. Success. 105 goes in the box. I know that 80 of those people just touched the work very, very faintly, came to one thing maybe. 25 of them had a really interesting experience, possibly transformative. But each individual had got a totally different experience of what being homeless meant and a totally different experience of the project. So I've put 105 in a box. It's told you absolutely nothing about what went on, and yet that number is then going to be used by that funder as a measure of success. And we all know it means little or nothing, but we all behave as if it is useful. And this is not just my experience. Through this inquiry, we found it's a common experience, and often, and not always fairly, we blame it on the funders. But actually we're all responsible for this, because we're all playing this game knowing that it's nonsense. So we arrived at storytelling as a methodology because evaluation for us had become this annoying afterthought based on feedback forms and lots of counting, and was wasting a lot of our time. And our first attempt back in 2017 produced so much learning about our impact and what we did that we actually rewrote our mission statement, because we discovered that the thing we thought we were doing wasn't the most important thing. We discovered that the most important thing was different. And we only found that out by asking people to tell us, instead of trying to push them down the line that we'd predetermined. So to be clear, we do think it's important to count the right things in the right way. We've got no problem with quantitative measures, but we are acutely aware that it is also relatively easy for us as a smallish charity to explore these ideas, because we're not wrestling with the hugely complex process of managing public services. And let's face it, if we don't get an exhibition up on time, nobody dies. I mean, the people putting up the exhibition think that somebody might die if it doesn't get up on time, but it won't happen. So we're in a privileged position. We're able to explore these ideas and play with these ideas, but we also think, as a result of that, others can pick up some of that thinking, and indeed, of course, we can from them. We do not have the answer, but we do think it's important to pose the question. Measurement matters. If the measures are not human friendly, then the service won't be either. How we measure and how we learn fundamentally affects how we work. So, I was at a session yesterday morning. I sat around a table with a man who's in the room, he's just there, called Andrew, and he pointed out there's no such thing as meaningless measurement, because even the negative stuff has meaning. It just gives it the wrong kind of meaning, unhelpful meaning, so it still has power. However, I couldn't be bothered to change the name of the slide. So, meaningless measurement. Conventional approaches they don't always, but they can put us in a really tricky position, because it means we're saying one thing and doing something else, because it's not aligned with our values. It can undermine the relationships we have with people. We think we've got an equal adult-adult relationship, and then we're shoving forms in front of their noses, telling them to tell us how lonely they are. It focuses on predetermined outcomes that we have set, instead of what actually happened, finding out what actually happened as opposed to what we hope happened. It wastes our time. As I've said, it encourages overclaiming. And it's often so simplistic. It doesn't capture the fuzziness, the messiness of people's lives, the confusing bits, the bits that don't all add up. But actually that is what lives are like. And when we're working with people, we have to live in that complexity. And our evaluation processes have to be able to live in that complexity. So meaningful measurement, in our view, has massive benefits for individuals and organisations, and indeed for people who are commissioning work. I mean, for individuals, what we found by asking them is that giving people an opportunity to tell their own story or to find their own way of expressing what went on helps them themselves learn. So it's not an entirely extractive thing for our benefit, it's actually a useful process for the person concerned. And they start to understand better what it means for them. There's more of an opportunity for them to be heard, their voices to be amplified, and to therefore influence decisions, to be part of shaping how the work is perceived and represented. And it can be really good fun and enjoyable and creative and rewarding. For organisations, it helps us listen better. It helps us build relationships with people because we're getting alongside them. It understands what matters and what really happened, as I've said. And crucially, it centres the voice of the people most involved in the work. And that includes the workers involved in that work and the volunteers and anybody else associated with it who are close to that work. Suddenly their voices become important in trying to understand what's going on. It generates meaningful data that can then inform our decisions. It reflects the complexity I've said. It is all about collaboration, so it fosters that. It encourages participative analysis and more people being involved in the thinking and the learning together rather than it being done by an individual sat at their desk looking at the numbers on their own. And it provides an opportunity to embed learning and reflection within the culture of the organisation so that learning is no longer the afterthought. It is no longer the thing that you might get round to once a year at your away day. It's now the day job. It's actually the point of the exercise. And for funders and commissioners, it helps them understand grant impact much more accurately and much more helpfully. It helps them connect directly with the significance of the work instead of it being mediated. It helps them build relationships with their grantees, which are based on trust and transparency. It encourages the grantees to say they failed and they're learning from that failure, because they're no longer frightened of being punished because they failed to meet a KPI. It generates data that is useful for decisions, and it supports partners to learn and strengthen their work. Surely every funder would want to do that. So it's obvious that this is what we should be doing. And a year ago we were asking the question of ourselves, what is meaningful measurement? Why does it matter? And it's a rare moment for me to move from tentative to certain. I'm prepared to stand here now and say a year later, we now know. We just got to do this.